Welcome to another release weekend at Canal Place. This weekend we are releasing a new version of our Extragalactic Origins series. Now, if you guys don't know, this is our rotating Gose series that just features different fruits. And we kind of get the name from Extragalactic Origins. You're not going to find this in this galaxy, in our galaxy. You got to try hard to find it. So this is kind of our experimental name. And it kind of takes off of our centaur tiers in the valley, which is also our experimental Gose. So they brew that up in the valley. They do a bunch of experiments. They release it. You guys rate it. We kind of pick the best ones or what you guys resonated with the most. Then we scale it up. So for sweet cherry and key lime, this was a very early valley quarantine beer. I believe we made it and had it in the tanks right before March, before we knew we were going to be shut down. And just looking through the untaps in April, May, June, you guys were really checking it in from the cans down in the valley, and you guys really liked it. I believe it's a 3.93 on Untappd. A couple hundred reviews. So it's a solid beer. Cherries and key limes, to me, that just screams summer. So we thought this would be a perfect time to release this. Now, the process of making this beer, it's a relatively simple in grain recipe. It's just Pilsner malt, it's wheat, a little bit of acidulated. And what we do differently with this beer, since it is a sour, is we will do our mash on Friday. We will add the souring organisms like a lactobacillus. That'll sour through the weekend. And then we will work it up, finish the boil on Monday, pump it in the fermenter, add the fruits, and that's how we make this beer. So we usually make this beer Friday, let it sour through the weekend, then do the fermentation the following week. So it takes a little bit of planning, but it's been working great so far. This beer in particular, sweet cherry and key lime, this was a little tough for me personally, because even though we made it a certain way in the valley with X amount of sweet cherry and Y amount of key lime, when we scale it up, we don't want to assume that jumping from 3 barrels to 20 barrels or 40 is going to directly translate as far as the fruit. And plus the valley is always just our first try. It's our first dart throw, whether we get it close or not. It is what it is. So we take what the valley is, use it as a base, but we don't just scale that up multiplicatively at Canal Place. We hold some things back. And for this, we started with the same amount of sweet cherry in fermentation as we did in the valley. We've been working with that long enough to where we know we need in the valley 4 to 5 boxes of the main fruit to ferment. And then if you've got a different fruit like a lime, something strong but it doesn't need a lot, lime, lemons, stuff like that, pomegranates, you don't want to throw that in at first. You want to hold that back till the end of fermentation, enough to where you get beer, even though it's warm and not fizzy. Work it up with a little bit of key lime or the fruit you're looking for to get that balance. And then scale that up, add the key lime into the fermenter, finish fermentation, and then we cold crash it and finish. So I remember last week, I spent one morning, we've got the sweet cherry. It was very strong in the sweet cherry, but it needed that balance of the lime. So initially I came to the conclusion that we need this amount of lime for this size of batch, and that'll be good. So we put that lime in, we let it finish fermenting, and I tasted it again, and I did not get the key lime, like rats. So I worked it up again because that sweet cherry was just so dominating. And the math I came up with was another of the same amount of key lime. So I don't know what was wrong with my palate that day when I first worked it up, but I had to add a whole nother amount of key lime to it just to get it to come through, not dominating, but just to balance that sweet cherry. So we did that. I was happy with it. We were all happy with it. And we're not done there, because the thing with Goses is there's a salt component that we add in just to give it a little bit of just a touch of salinity, and we find it softens the sharpness of the sour, and it can accentuate certain fruits. So when we make this on Monday, when we're finishing it up in the boil, before we add our fruit, usually you would add your salt or your mineral additions there. But being a Gose and kind of the first time scaling up, we don't want to put the salt in at the beginning, because if you put too much salt in, you can't take it back out. So we have been, with all of these that we scale up, we will get to the finished beer. It's cold crashed, it's carbonated. We've got the base flavors there, the cherry and key lime in the balance that we want. And then on a small scale, like in this scale, use a pipette, get the amount of salt that we need, and then work that math up and then add the salt to the fermenter. And that's how we've been doing these. So this one took a lot of work. It involved several people tasting it on the brew floor and our hop grower, Andy. And we finally got it. So enough of that. Let's try this beer. Let me just say, this is a beautiful beer. And our bittering hops is Mount Hood, just enough to balance it. Not enough to give it any hop character to speak of. Look at that, nice cherry red. I get that sweet cherry, a little bit on the nose. Before we added the key lime, it was a lot more apparent, a little too much cloyingly. But now we've got the balance with the key lime in there. Get a little bit of acidity on the nose. There. That is the perfect match between sweet cherry and key lime. Pinky's out. Now, since we're mid-July and it's hot, like I said, it's only getting hotter. I was thinking we gotta work this up a few different ways. Some people, well, a lot of us, you can't just crush 8% Goses all day and all weekend. So what else can we do with this? So, there's a few simple things we can do with this, and it's being 8%, it's got some versatility. So, we did the lab red in the valley before. That it was a Hefeweizen. It was a teed Hefeweizen, you know, tea leaves. And it had a little bit of fruit, possibly peaches. And we served it over ice. And it was an awesome beer. The only complaint that we got is the Hefeweizen started at like 5%. So by the time you poured it on the ice and you got halfway through it, it was like a 2 or 3% beer. So that's where this 8% comes in at, because as plus the ice gets it super cold. Look at that, little garnishment. So now that's a great summer drink. If you fill it up with ice, it'll start out 8%. Maybe midway through to the end, it gets to about 5%, 4%. So you could just drink these and be happy all day. Another thing you do with this is, being that it is a Gose and it is a little bit sour, there's no problem adding a little sugar with the ice, then pour the beer on if you want to just back sweeten it up a little bit for a different type of a cocktail. I haven't tried it, but I know that will be a solid plan for this. And being 8% on ice, you can experiment with a lot of other different liqueurs and drinks. I'm thinking rum would be a good one for this. I love rum. So you've got a lot of ways to play with this beer in the coming months. It'll probably be in distribution at least through next month. And we'll have it on Canal Place, both in draft and in cans for a month. And food and cheese pairings, the good thing about Goses is it's great with seafood. Some seafood, depending on what you're eating, comes from the sea. It can be a little bit briny. And even if you get seafood that doesn't have that brine, this Gose will bring a little bit of brininess to it, a little bit of lip saltiness to where you're like, hey, you're at the beach, a little bit of ocean, you're like immersed in it. It brings it all together with the seafood. Seafood. Cheese pairings, goat and Asiago. And that is about it for this beer. I'm excited for this release. I hope you are too. There's a lot of possibilities for eating and drinking with it. So we hope you have a good weekend and we hope to see you.